Raw knowledge, we're back. Alex Connor, training, nutrition, lifestyle. Emphasis being on lifestyle this week with my guest. I'm talking with Brad Semmens, and he's a top bloke. That's what you need to know, first of all. We actually met at EMF Performance Centre here in the Gold Coast of Robina, where I am a strength and conditioning coach. We just got chatting back and forth, and I spoke to one of my friends who also works within EMF, and she sort of name dropped Brad and said, "Hey, have you met Brad yet? I think you'll really get on, considering our mindset." And he might be someone to chat to about, coaching and getting ahead from the more psychological space and the more holistic sort of ground, if you will. Anyway, had a chat to Brad about that and about his passions, and yes, very inspirational indeed. We connected, had a bit of a bromance. I think that's what the kids call it these days. All right. Anyway, we connected. There's a lot of value. Brad has a multitude of experience. A little bit about Brad, to give you a bit of a background, but you're going to hear a little bit more, or should I say a lot more, very soon. So Brad considers himself more of a business strategist who specialises in leadership, culture, and behavioural development within small to medium-sized businesses, with a background in behavioural coaching and human resource management. So some of the qualifications that Brad has, he's again got a bit of a plethora. He's got a master's in NLP, so that's neuro-linguistic programming, timeline therapy, and Eriksonian hypnotherapy. And he's currently finishing off a human resources management studies within a local university here in the GC. And he's really, really curious, very curious and hungry to continue and answer the questions, the big questions we all have in life, like who we are, why we're here, how the universe works, etc. So again, we're not getting woo-woo, all right? But there is a lot more to life than the materialistic aspect sometimes that we can kind of get all caught up in and the bubble. And me and Brad talk about in this conversation looking at things from the inside out. So flipping the script, if you will, starting at the beginning, or perhaps even going back to the beginning to go forward and then to progress even further. It's something that has been really insightful to myself, listening to Brad, having a chat to him, obviously off camera, and spending some time picking his brains and listening to what he's got to say via his experience. I've definitely taken a lot on board. I think we can all sort of internalize and really think about what we want, and perhaps sometimes we're not quite aligned, and maybe we do need to go back to those core values. But how do we find those core values? What are they? How do you get there? There's many questions, and this is a really thought-provoking podcast. Once again, there's tons of value to be taken out of it. And Brad walks you through a little bit about the process, the context, the definition, perhaps some of the systems that you can implement as well, or things you can start to do to go back to that core self and start to build yourself up with more quality and authenticity, I think being one of the main words within the realms of psychology. What goes on in people's minds, in our minds, is just like Alice in Wonderland down the rabbit hole to make one example. And I think we've all had these experiences in our life, when you start to think about these things very deeply, and where do you go with it? It's just very overwhelming, to say the least. So again, a fantastic and phenomenal conversation, one that we could have gone on for a lot longer. Yes, there's probably going to be more. There's definitely going to be more to uncover, I think, on specific niche topics. So at the end of the day, we were just a couple of nerds, just really getting together, sharing some knowledge, sharing some experiences, and trying to extrapolate and define it out for you guys, so you can perhaps take some key takeaways and start to apply this to your own life. But also, I think the big one here is awareness as well, like becoming aware of these things and the things that affect you. And to leave you with a bit of an example, I read The Power of Habit a while back, and anyway, at the end of the book, it's one of the best summaries and the analogies about habits. I wish perhaps they would have said this at the start, because it's a very long-winded and constantly changing and dynamic storyline, the way they weave together the lessons within the book using real life examples and real people, etc., and then sort of bringing them back to the actual lesson and sort of intertwining that. Anyway, at the end of the book, it said, if we were a fish, you were in water. Again, something to this effect. Don't quote me. It's not word for word. All right. Most people are going with the current, and that is not being in control of your habits or not being aware of them. So most people are going with the current and they think their life's going the way they want, but it's not. All right. And learning the power of habit, how to create, break, replace, and change habits gives you the ability to swim as a fish or swim against the current, so you become more powerful. Swimming against the current allows you to not go with the flow and be manipulated by marketing or whatever it is in this today's society or anything that influences you externally, but it allows you to take control from an internal perspective and then bend your own reality and create your own habits and better, more advantageous habits, which are going to be more congruent to the lifestyle that you want to live, which in and of itself is quite riveting and freeing to know. We are aware, but I don't think we're that aware. I think a lot of the time the veil is pulled over our eyes. So we are removing the veil. We are starting to remove the veil. And me and Brad are going to talk to you a little bit about that today. As always, thank you for tuning in. If you like this podcast, leave a rating and a review on iTunes, Spotify, whatever platform you're listening to it on. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube as well, because there is weekly vlogs with myself. They're a little bit more raw and real. I put them together myself. And they're just basically most common and popular topics that come to mind that arise from me working with clients week to week, the biggest myths in the industry, the biggest misconceptions, things that people really get wrong, things that I've learned myself from making tons of mistakes, and again, just trying to communicate that across in an educational way. So I guess we've got educators, we've got communicators. I like to think of myself as an educational communicator, communicating education based on other great evidence from amazing communicators that's legitimate, authentic, and also adding my own sort of anecdotal, real-life, hands-on experience too. But without further ado, because now I am beginning to ramble once again, that is an ability I have. I like to talk, hence why you're listening to this podcast. It is long-form content, people. It is here in your ear holes right now. So enjoy this conversation with Brad, and I will see you all very soon. Brad, welcome to the Fearless Training Raw Knowledge podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Mate, it's a pleasure. So let's start off, as we always do, from the beginning. It's usually a good place to start.
Let's start there.
Right? Tell us who you are, your role, your title, what you do, why you do it. Give us a bit of an insight into the world that is yours.
So I'm a business strategist, and predominantly what I work with when it comes to business owners is really working on a behavioural level. So all things leadership and culture development. And funnily enough though, a lot of that stems back to figuring out our own internal stuff that we've got going on, and then indirectly and directly that completely changes how we approach business in terms of the quality of our leadership, people, and all things culture in general. But most of the work that I do with business owners is more to do with their own personal stuff, which is where I have the most fun as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good, I like it. And so there are some of the key topics. We've obviously had a conversation off camera. There are some of the things that we want to really get into today and start to unpack and divulge, because I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people out there, despite whether they're business owners or not, that still want to improve their self-development, but especially for the business owners out there. So talk us through then how you achieve that, and then let's start to sort of dig a little bit deeper and then unpack some of those principles, perhaps look at some applicable takeaways for the listeners, etc.
For sure. So first and foremost, a lot of business owners that are doing really great in the industry, they're great at building an empire. But what I notice is in a lot of them, they still have this sense of like lack of fulfillment or incompleteness. And a lot of the time their relationships suck, to put it bluntly. And that's really what they're wanting to do. They're wanting to not only create a better relationship with themselves, but also with everyone around them, in their personal life and also in their business. So a lot of it really is about helping them realize the mask that they've been wearing this whole time, and having them sincerely and honestly realize that potentially they've been hiding their pain in their performance, and they've been deriving their worth out of their work. So basically we go into unpacking that in many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Have you got any personal anecdotes, or not personal, sorry, real life with clients experiences that you can share that are not confidential, or can you use some examples, and please feel free, whatever you feel comfortable sharing in your own life, to perhaps illustrate that a little bit more? Yeah,
absolutely. So a particular client that runs a business that employs around 12 to 15 staff members, this particular person was very much a go-getter, very much a visionary, but also had this tendency to really want to stay in control.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was, instead of being about the business and about the greater vision, over time it started to become more just about them and protecting their own feelings, rather than doing what's best for the business and best for the service that they want to provide. So basically, I help these business owners bring about the awareness that, hang on, what if how you're behaving and how you're interacting isn't necessarily coming from the most authentic and effective place? And so how can we go ahead and restore our inner conditions, who we are on the inside, instead of trying to rearrange our outside and have it all a certain way to compensate for the lack thereof within? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So basically we go through unpacking that in many different ways, and one of the models that I do love to share with business owners and had a massive impact on my life and also on theirs, is sharing the model called the 3 selves. So is it cool if I just go and unpack that for a moment?
Go for it.
So the way that I like to nutshell it is, if we want to experience better results in business, we want to have better, more fulfilling, thriving relationships. In other words, we want to have our external conditions be a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
We need to actually change our internal conditions, and indirectly, almost just naturally as a result, our outward external conditions will change. So another way of looking at that is, everyone's caught up in having these external goals in business, in their personal life, but what about our internal ones? Instead of trying to refine or enhance the connections with our outer world and people within it, how about we go to the foundation and figure out how we can refine and resolve and create a better connection within ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So just quickly, the 3 selves model, when we were born and we look at who we were as like little children, what's some of the first things that would come to mind?
As in, how we perceive ourselves?
Or like how we behave, So often,
it's like curiosity and energy.
Curiosity, spontaneity,
excitement.
excitement, resilient, risk-taking. All of those things are wonderful qualities and attributes that I think somewhere along the way, a lot of us have disconnected from. And so instead of being curious and willing to take a chance, it's more about staying safe and staying and being in control, or not being emotionally available or vulnerable, and now it's just about being more guarded and protected. So the 3 selves basically helps us understand, who are we at core? Who are we at essence? What does our authentic self, feel like, look like, and seem like it, and think like, and behave? And then, so what's happened is, when we're little, that's called our core self. It has all those beautiful qualities wrapped in it. And then somewhere along the journey, we develop what's called our crud. Crud. So it's kind of like the
You're
shame.
building a layer over the top of that.
Yeah, because when we're little,
you're naive, you're pure, you know no different.
Absolutely.
I just want to, interject, because I think this is a good example. We all know the child who comes up and says something that they, I'm using quotation, air quotes here, shouldn't say.
Yeah.
But where it came from is a good place because it was truth, right? It was
innocent.
Yeah, it was just like you say what you feel, but then you get to a point where, you know, you grow up and you're like, oh, I keep that opinion to myself now. What if people laugh at me? What if people, you know, and you know, the parent always goes, oh, you know, like, just, you can't say that. It's like, well, really, we should never lose part of that, but we do.
Yes.
So I guess continue. You go back
to
that.
No, absolutely.
So you build the crud.
Yeah, so
That's
what happens, we're living out of our core, our authentic core, true self, and then certain things start to happen when we're growing up. We do something, we come inside with mud all over ourselves, and we get that frown. Now, to a little child, you've got these big magical people that the big magical people. They look down on you, the big giants that feed you, clothe you. You make a sound, and they're there.
Yeah.
You know, they're your saviors. They're the gods. They could never get anything wrong, but they frown at you because you were being a child. You were being in your core. You were acting from your core self, and then all of a sudden that was dismissed, shunned, belittled in some way, no matter how large or small that might be. To an innocent little child, that can be somewhat traumatic. And so we form this layer of crud. We go, oh shit, maybe I can't do that. So we slowly disconnect from our risk-taking. We slowly disconnect from expressing an emotion because, say, anger might not have been accepted, or we weren't allowed to be sad.
It's like these little micro shifts.
Absolutely, yes. And so this is what I call the splitting of our being starts to occur. And so we've got our core, then we develop this crud, the holy shit, the shame, the toxic shame and the toxic guilt. And then in order to conceal that crud, we develop what's called our crust.
Which is what you referred to
which is
off camera when you were talking about
Yeah, absolutely. So
now
the crust
makes more sense.
Yeah, the crust is essentially the role we then play. The mask.
Right, if we can use that analogy.
100%. So we can call it the mask, we can call it the crust, or we can call it the role that we play to get by and survive.
Right, it's the character, hence the
character.
Yeah.
Because if we don't have a mask, all of our pain, shame and guilt and fear then is revealed, it's exposed. So we have to find a way to cover that up.
So we're not vulnerable.
So absolutely, so that we can't be seen for who we truly are. We can't be heard for who we truly are. So we create this mask of what we think the world and others will love us for, and that's our way of getting by. So instead of staying as our core self and living our unique, authentic values that are true to us, we end up having the values of the world and other people lived, which is in our crust. So we end up in our crust. They're not our values. They're the world's and other people's values, and in particular, the big magical people's values.
Yeah. So you become very sort of disproportioned, you know, not aligned at all. I'm starting to connect some dots myself here.
Yeah.
I referenced to you before we started this conversation a podcast I listened to this morning. There's a segment there I just want to share because he reminded me of it, and it was just an excerpt from it, and he was trying to explain again about when you're young, or he used a personal anecdote where his father, you know, would get mad at him when he was happy. And remember, one time he was playing a game or something, his dad was shouted at him, and he said, like, it's the last time, I'm never going to be happy, because apparently being happy isn't good. So he shut that emotion out, and that was one of his issues.
Yeah.
But that just sort of reminded me of that whole influence, and that became the crud, that became his crust.
Yes.
And that became his belief.
Yes.
Right? That happiness was bad.
Yes.
That he wasn't meant to be happy.
Yeah.
Because when he was young, it was disassociated by the big magical people. It was discerned that was not the behaviour.
Yes.
Which should be portrayed.
Absolutely.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, and so basically our crust is formed, and most people, whether we like to admit it or not, predominantly live from our crust. And that's what I help business owners understand, that, for example, this is a generalization, so allow me the breathing room here, but what happens is a lot of business owners, they were brought up being the performer, the high achiever, the star, the golden child, the one that can't be seen crying or vulnerable.
No weakness.
They have to have their shit together.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And you see that with so many business owners, hey?
Oh yeah.
They've just got to have their shit together, and they develop this complex, which is all tied into the crust of being somewhat more than human, superior in some way, which means guardedness, which means lack of vulnerability. And basically, this is what I help them break through, realize that the crust served them in their younger days, and it served to a large degree to build the business, but now to create a sustainable, a scalable, an authentic business. Yeah, and self and business, they're so interrelated. We need to let go, we need to disengage from the crust and get back to core.
Right.
In order to get back to core and live authentically, we have to drop the role of being the hero or the rescuer or the golden child or the top performer or the mascot, whatever it might be. And which means we have to face our crud. All the stuff that we were shamed by, all the stuff that was shunned, all the stuff that was dismissed, that wasn't encouraged, that was in fact probably on the banned list. So that's...
Which I imagine is quite, well, for a lot of people, especially if someone's shut that out, quite over-facing initially. And is it, I'm just going to draw a conclusion here on my own.
Yeah,
please sort of tell me if this is true based on your experience. Someone who perhaps has a bigger crust or has been doing it for more years, so someone who's older, or say someone who's 60 years old in business and has not addressed that yet, is that something that's generally, and this is just a generalization, is it harder because they've got more crud to get through, or is it obviously individual? Perhaps maybe there's not enough crud, the issues are just bigger, or they've just been playing it off a little bit longer. Is there some correlation there? Is it the case of the earlier you address this, the better?
Yeah.
Or is it just due to, again, many other multifaceted things where it depends on the person's behaviours or the ability to look within oneself and go, well, I'm going to deal with this shit. There's a lot on my plate, but I'm just going to one bite at a time. Yeah,
it's a very interesting point you've mentioned. It's not it's not an easy task to disengage from our crust, to step out of our splitted, false or adapted self, whatever you want to call it. There's many names for this. I like to use lots of ways of describing one particular thing so that people can understand it. So it's challenging, because think about it. If you were operating from your core a very long time ago for a short time, then the crud occurred, then you build the crust. And so we're doing the crust, from as early as 3 years old, we start to develop a crust. We start to shut down and close off. And then all the way through, say you get to 40 years old, and you've been living out of your crust, reacting the same way, only being connected to your anger because you weren't able to access sadness or to be open and vulnerable, and so you stay guarded and connected to your anger. Think about it. You've basically built your whole life and your business and every result you've experienced operating from that role, from that crust, from that adapted, splitted, fragmented self. That's a difficult task to start to undo. To basically, you've got to defy against your entire universe. You've got to rebel against your reality. And think about it. Every relationship, every interaction you've established from living from the crust.
Yes.
So those people only know you by who you are from your crust.
So those foundations are weak.
Absolutely.
And it falters, and that is obviously quite overwhelming, I guess, at times.
And just to insert here, this is where a lot of people experience midlife crisis.
Right.
And the alarm bells start ringing, and so what worked for them for quite a while, then all of a sudden cracks start appearing. And then they start to realize that certain people that they've attracted, or certain ways they behave based on their crust, they start to realize that something's not right, something's not working for them anymore, something's not serving them. So they go, shit, what's going on here? And this is where people begin to go, holy crap. Not only does my outside world have to change, but I have to change as well. But who am I? I've been lost all along. My being has been splitted and fragmented for so long, and I thought it was me, and it's just what I've always done. But what if it wasn't actually who you truly are? you see, because you've been operating from your crust and not your core. So to now go on that journey, you've basically got to go against the grain of every decision, choice, behaviour and relationship dynamic that you've established in the past in order to get back to core. Some things will stay, but a lot of it will crumble. And that's a scary journey to go on.
It is.
You know?
I can imagine so. Well, okay, let's follow that line of inquiry then. Now, I understand this is not a one-size-fits-all. And every person is unique, and I'm sure every client you work with has, got their own pros and cons and demons to slay, or whatever you want to call it. So what does this journey look like from the start? Can we start to look at what that looks like?
Totally.
From a sort of a bigger picture perspective. Yep. You get a client, again, I know it's totally unique with everyone, but where do you start? How do, if people now are listening going, well, because I can imagine some people might be like, to quote one of my favourite not philosophers, Ali G, chickadee check yourself before you wreck yourself, right? Yeah. Keeping it real.
Yes.
Because some people now might be now like, whoa, okay, so, we don't want to, what is it, analysis by paralysis?
Yeah.
Over-assess yourself and go, hang on, find a problem that isn't there.
Totally.
But at the same time, we live in this world now.
Yeah.
We've talked about this before, but everyone wants to improve, myself included. We want to progress without being over-analytical. Where do you start?
Okay. That's a
big question. But
so I'm going to share a nice big mouthful here.
Go for it.
It's going to be great.
You go for it. This is long-form content at its best.
Absolutely. So a quote that I heard from one of my mentors, Sharon Pearson, is that everyone's seeking redemption. It's either in the person, in the thing, in the new contract that you land, in the new client, in the new car or the house we buy. But the truth is, if we don't go within, we will indeed go without. And so, as I was saying before, everyone tries to rearrange their external world in order to fix how they feel about themselves, to try and restore or alleviate or compensate for the lack of self-love, self-worth, and feeling like you're enough and that we matter. So where we start is, instead of trying to create the plan, the next business deal or, do something crazy out there, we have to just pause, because if we go and start with the end in mind, we're actually doing it from a place of escapism. So right there, let's put on the brakes and let's acknowledge truly where we are at on our journey right now, the problems that we're facing. And here's the part that most people don't like doing. This is where we need to look at how, on some level, our current reality and all the problems and challenges that we're facing right now, how could that be serving us? How could that be keeping the crust, the false and adapted self, in place? What could, on an unconscious level, be the hidden motives that all these problems and obstacles are providing for us right now? And most people will go, huh? What do you mean? I'm not getting out of being 50 kilos overweight and unattractive. I hate it. I've been doing it my whole life. We only ever do. So this has been studied and this has been acknowledged by many philosophers and professionals in the psychological space, including Dr. John Demartini. He's great with this. We only do what works for us on some level. Any challenge that we're experiencing, that is there, and especially if it's repetitive, we are continuously experiencing that challenge because there's a hidden advantage to it. So on some level, it is, and to cut straight to the point, it's keeping us safe and comfortable and not taking responsibility and growing. It is preserving and maintaining the status quo of our life. So it perpetuates the beliefs and the stories that we get to continue to tell ourselves, either about ourselves, others, life, money, relationships, men, women, whatever it is. And so basically it's for self-preservation. So it's important that we uncover the secondary gain or the hidden benefits in terms of all the problems and challenges that we're currently facing. So that's where we start. Pure acknowledgement of our now, of our current version of who we are, and the reality that we're experiencing. So Shall I keep going?
Yes. No, this is good.
So once
I don't want to interrupt you.
once we've established and acknowledged, and now this takes time. This is not sit down with a pen and paper and just write out all the shit that I've gone through.
Yeah.
This takes sincere reflection. This takes grieving. This takes really expressing and sharing with someone else to be validated, heard, seen, acknowledged, etc. Once we really just accept where we're at right now, that will calm us down so that we're not frantically trying to run off and create this elaborate future and struggle on the way there, which so many people do. Once we've established the current version of ourselves, we then look at our conditioning. Okay? We look at our conditioning. Well, who am I? Am I more introverted or extroverted? Am I more about control, or am I more about letting go and surrendering? They're 4 categories that typically will create problems for people. So if I'm dysfunctionally introverted and more all about having control, we can actually correlate and trace most of our problems that stem from being more introverted and all the aspects that come with that, being more guarded, less vulnerable, less open, etc. I am generalizing here, but we need to generalize so that we can kind of help everyone understand how they fit into the jigsaw puzzle of life.
Yeah, sort of start off with the big rocks.
And then we can get more specific. Yeah, exactly. So basically we acknowledge everything that's going on for us, and then we look at our conditioning. And in other words, we look at our crust.
Yes.
We start to look at our crust and how the crust survives and thrives and feeds and gets to maintain all its limitations, its fears, its guilts and everything like that, its dysfunctions. Then we go, okay, well, where did this all start? How did this all form? So now we need to do what I call original pain work. We actually need to go back and finish our past. We need to heal our past and that which is unresolved so that we can actually authentically and congruently, lovingly and trustingly, not through fear and doubt, create and forge a beautiful future. So we go back and we do what I call original pain and original sin work. And what I mean by that is we look at our mother and father wounds. So when I was growing up, the little me, the innocent me, living out of core, as we mentioned the model before, right? Had certain things happen to the point where our being started to split because it was no longer about the big magical people and environment I grew up in meeting my needs, my emotions, respecting, caring and loving my boundaries. It was more about me taking care of the big magical people's dysfunctions and pains. And so that's where the adapted false self, the crust, really occurred, right? Because there was some insufficiencies growing up in the home. And
sorry, interject, I think it's most homes. I think most people will be nodding away now going, yeah, you know, doesn't matter how good your upbringing, there's some dysfunction, which to be is by some means probably normal. I mean, you don't.
It is.
What is perfect? What is normal?
Absolutely.
You know, that's probably another conversation in and of itself. But continue. But I believe, I think everyone can sort of relate or maybe look back.
Absolutely.
Even if it's from a pessimistic standpoint. To see, oh, hang on, maybe, I wasn't happy with that. Or
And here's a key thing. What we need to understand is we are actually multi-dimensional beings. So this is known in the psychology space quite well, that when we're at a particular developmental phase on our journey when we're little, and say we're experiencing sadness because something's happened, but we are all of a sudden stopped in the moment, hey, don't be sad, I'll give you something to cry about, or what are you crying for, there's nothing to be sad about. As a little child, to hear that, as unfortunate as it is, we still perceive the big magical people as right. And we glorify them and we glamorize them. They couldn't get it wrong. They're the big magical people.
Yeah.
I'm still discovering who I am. I'm a clean slate. I have no self-reference. I'm still very illogical in my thinking. I have no true understanding of the world. I kind of get hungry and make a little squirmy sound and food's on the table. You know, everything's magical. I'm stuck in this magical thinking.
Yeah.
You know,
it's a good analogy. It's right though, isn't it?
Where
you do. It's just it's all grandiose when you're small. It all just happens, right? Because you're so dependent on everything.
Yes, and that's the key thing. I like that you said that. The dependency we have on the big magical people is so great because our foundations are barely built. We've just come out of the womb for, 1, 2, 3 years ago. And so, therefore, when some insufficiencies occur or a need isn't met or they say something in a particular way, or as I was mentioning before, we're crying and then they go, stop. We're actually frozen developmentally. Our connection to that emotion becomes frozen then and there. So whilst we're 40 years old and we've got wrinkles and we've got a car and we're earning a lot more money and we have a family, that part of us is still developmentally frozen in time. So I meet a lot of business owners that find it hard to connect with their sadness. So they stay uptight, rigid and angry. And so to go back and acknowledge that there were some insufficiencies, that there were some needs that weren't met, that there were moments where they really wanted to say no, but they couldn't because they were innocent, that they perceived the big magical people as innocent, loving, caring, nurturing, even though they did some kind of weird stuff and traumatic stuff towards the little person. And so we basically restore, what I call it restoring the truth about childhood.
That sounds about accurate. It makes sense.
Yeah, restore the truth about childhood. And allow that little me.
Is that what people refer to as the inner child?
Yeah, that a lot of this.
Is that another sort of a bit of terminology that can relate? Yeah.
So this is a lot of inner child work. A saying that I love is that we're all kids in adult costumes.
I like that one. That's a good one. That's a good quote.
Yeah, we're all kids in adult costumes.
Yeah, and it's you're not wrong because I mean we often hear whether it's on a TV program, whether it's on radio stations, whether it's through a book, these references, of going back and addressing early childhood. A context, people will use towards women will say, oh, she's got daddy issues.
Yes.
We hear this a lot thrown around, but I think this all comes back to this again, addressing the little person, or the inner child, or whatever you want to deem it as.
Yes.
But it sounds, and this is my interpretation, that like it's within those realms of going back and having a look at that, and these issues stem from your childhood, but people might say, well, why is it always your childhood? Maybe it's not always from your childhood, but that is when you were most malleable, right? That's when you were most ductile. That's when you were like as people say, a sponge.
Yes.
You were absorbing
it. Absolutely.
So then it almost is a bit of a thought-provoking statement to go, well, can you pick your parents? No. But do they really determine your success to a point before you have to become aware? And are you fortunate enough to become aware of one of my favourite statements from one of my favourite writers, Neil Strauss, is you have to at some point become your own parent.
Yeah, right? 100%.
So maybe, I don't know, you probably got some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I do.
So I'd like you to sort of maybe perhaps explain and define that a little bit more from your greater understanding. So
as part of, as I love what you said there, becoming your own parent is... And this ties in with a work by a gentleman by the name of John Bradshaw. He was well renowned and he was known as one of the leading influences in the psychological space, especially to do with like inner child healing and stuff. And a lot of his work is around what's called the homecoming. So where we become the champion of our inner child and we actually restore. So basically, because we've split it off, we've got our core self, then we've created the crud. Based on the insufficiencies and the lack of needs that were met in our childhood. And then we create our crust, which carries us throughout our life. And then we go, oh crap, I need to do the work. I've been experiencing these problems the whole time and stuff's really got to change. So we go back, which is where we're at in the conversation. We go back, we restore the truth of our childhood. We basically start to slowly end the war within and allow our being to unify and merge and become whole and one again. This is the journey back to our core, living from our authentic, congruent, aligned, loving and trusting self. So to tie in with that, becoming our own parent, that means that we have to de-glamorize and take the fantasy out of how things were. Because a lot of people that were severely hurt, traumatized, wounded by their parents, and then thus became a certain way, say, oh, my childhood was good, you know. So as adults, we tend to minimize, we tend to justify, we tend to generalize what happened way back when, even if it was, shut up.
Yeah.
Don't do that again. That can be very traumatic for a child in the moment, especially if it happened from like out of shock, like, you know, left of field. That goes straight into the unconscious mind, and that is now locked in. That's stuck there. But at the adult in us, as we get older, nah, they were all right. That was all good.
Yeah.
And so,
you know, Dad hit me, but it was good for me and all that.
Yeah, I needed it. It made me strong.
Yeah.
And
needed
so,
a bit of discipline.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the adult in us, which is the part of us that's often denying of what went on, needs to cease so that we can go back and truly restore the truth. And through the adult denying what happened, that little child in us that still exists to this day, as we're multidimensional beings, remains unseen, unheard, not validated. So it remains wounded. So the original pains stay intact. And until we resolve the original pains, and this isn't to pin our parents on a cross, nail them to a cross or anything like that. It's purely to restore the truth. Because they're caught up in their own, living from their own, like, out of their own baggage.
I was going to say, it's very much a concertina effect, isn't it?
It's so interconnected.
It just continues to sort of domino.
Absolutely. And a lot of people will avoid that work because they feel like it's going to create conflict towards the parents. They're going to start to hate them and despise them. No, it's not about that at all. In fact, when you go back and do the work around restoring the truth of our childhood and healing our original pains, you actually develop more compassion and curiosity for your parents, for your primary caregivers, and it's beautiful. So that's basically, in a nutshell, that aspect of healing. Then as we grieve, as we express, as we start to connect with our misplaced emotions and misplaced and disconnected resources within ourselves because they weren't allowed, they're on the ban list and only certain things were encouraged. When we learn to reclaim all of those aspects of ourselves, those emotions, we then immediately begin to feel this sense of wholeness, this sense of this sense of fulfillment,
a weight off the shoulders.
Yeah, because we're
chest or whatever it might be.
Yeah, absolutely. It's different for everyone.
Freeing.
Yeah, and that's the reclaiming of who we truly are. That's the moving back to our core. By restoring the truth of our childhood, we immediately start to resolve our crud because we realize, we go, it actually wasn't me. It was them projecting their stuff onto me. I wasn't bad, I wasn't broken, I'm not wrong, I'm not flawed, I don't need fixing. I'm magnificent and beautiful the way I am. It's unique. It's just my environment and the big magical people did some things, and as a little kid I could only work with what I had, which was to internalize everything and make out as if it was me and that I'm broken.
Right.
Yeah, so you can see it's quite a broad topic, but and deep.
Yeah.
But I trust that I'm kind of wrapping it up in such a way that's understandable.
No, it's good.
Yeah.
I mean, you can keep digging and defining, and everyone's going to interpret it a little bit differently. And I guess that's where you come in, right, and actually help people along this journey, is what I imagine, and help them kind of stay on track and get specific with it and actually make progress. Yeah. Because otherwise, it's very ambiguous.
It is.
Where do you start? Because psychology is not physical, so it's not like you can use diagrams and examples, but there's this whole space in your mind, and it's just endless.
Absolutely.
So it's almost like trying to find, a galaxy in space. I mean,
how
do you know where to start?
The metaphor I love to use is it's like when the room is dark and you're scrambling around trying to find the light switch.
Correct.
You're bumping into things, you're fumbling. It's a very invisible, intangible journey. But the more you go within, the more clarity begins to reveal. The smog and the smoke and the haze begins to lessen. as you start to reconnect with who you truly are and start living from that space. And that's a beautiful journey that everyone deserves. And in a lot of philosophies and what's known by Joseph Campbell, it's called the hero's journey. And a lot of the work I do is really helping people go on the hero's journey, not the living from the crust and being the hero and the bravado and the go-getter like the person was conditioned to all along,
but going back,
but actually taking a step back in order to make progress forward from a more genuine and authentic space, you know, not being the hero all the time, and realizing that, hey, you can be held as well, and the world is a safe place, and people are safe, and they can receive you. So I kind of obviously unpacked a bit of an example, and I think that example is a common one that might speak to someone out there that's listening to this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to continue with that journey then, so say we've made this journey, or we're on this journey, we've gone back to the core, we've addressed those things. What do we have to have conversations? These are just some of my own thoughts that I'm thinking now, questions that are arising, and I imagine some people may be asking the same things. These conversations you have to have with your parents, or these conversations you have to have with your siblings, with your peers. If you're not able to have the conversations, how do you digress from that? And then what are some, apart from, you mentioned some sort of key feelings to let you know that perhaps you're making progress. Are there any other sort of key takeaways or little signs that you know that you're on the right track? Say if people want to go on this journey by themselves, is it something they can do by themselves?
Yeah, I love it. I love these questions. This is really important. So what I'm about to share, I trust that it will be applicable and people will be able to really grab this. And now there's quite a few things that I want to share, so I'll just try and make sure that I stay grounded in what I'm sharing and that it makes sense as best I can. So first and foremost, when we're going on this journey, often it's about addressing our shame. And a key thing to point out here is that our shame loves the shadows. Our shame loves to be in hiding, hence why we created a crust, a false and adapted self, to shield our crud, our shame, our guilt, our fear from the world. So first of all, we can't stay in the shadows. We have to come out. But what we need to do, we need to be discerning who we come out and speak to. So what a key strategy and technique that everyone can use is called mirroring. Now, to give a bit of context to what mirroring is, well, when we go back to our childhood, the big magic people were essentially our mirrors. So we didn't really have much of a sense of self when we were little. So we needed our universe. We're extremely dependent, as you said before, on our world, reflecting back to us and assuring us that we're okay, that we're enough, that we're lovable, that, you know, you can do this, but also there are some limitations as well. And you know, you need to have the limits. And so the mirrors, the big magical people, had their own insufficiencies and lack thereof. So basically, the problems and the issues stem from not having the mirrors in place the way we needed them. So now what we have to do is actually go ahead and heal ourselves with new mirrors. So in other words, a person that can hold space for you, and it's the conversation. Say, for example, I want to have a mirroring session because I've got some stuff that I just want to express and process and deal with. I choose a partner, and say I choose you to be my mirroring partner. Basically, the conversation cannot be about you. It's purely about me. And you're there to hold a loving, caring, and respecting space for me to just share how I feel, to be seen by you, to be fully seen, for you to be fully present and emotional, not crying because I'm crying or getting angry with me, just coming in as an absolute blank canvas, a mirror, to be truly seen, acknowledged, heard, and validated by you. So there's no reframing, there's no providing solutions for me, and there's no minimizing what happened. There's no getting shocked or surprised or making me feel like I'm being judged. It is just pure mirroring. And so say I'm sharing something that's gone on for me, and you just, I'm with you.
Yeah. Just sort of like acknowledge.
I get it. Yeah. No wonder you feel that way. Yeah, I get how that would be your experience. Like just genuine, sincere,
almost like
presence.
What a psychologist or a shrink would do to a degree. Just sort of, but obviously
what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, well, that's when they're listening, exactly.
Yeah.
But not obviously at this point rectifying. It's just you're sharing, I'm mirroring.
Yes, absolutely. And so this is an incredible way for people to realize that the world is safe, that people are safe, that they can be received, that I can be seen with my crud, and that it's safe for me to share my crud and not be judged but be totally loved. And that, by doing that, by having my being realize that I'm okay sharing my crud, the crust then has less fuel. It actually starts to die slowly because it realizes that it has no purpose here. It's not as needed as it once thought, because we're starting to really connect with, wow, I can be flawed and fabulous. I don't just have to be flawed. I don't have to just keep cruising through life, navigating life, being unseen, being unvulnerable, being guarded, and just, not being my true self. I can start to sing my song. And that is a very empowering experience for people. So mirroring is a very powerful thing. And just think and reflect for a moment on anyone that you might have in your life that holds a space for you, where you feel like, when you finish having a conversation with them, you feel lighter, They're the kind of people that you want to do this with. There's a couple of other things that I wanted to share, but I can't quite remember at the moment. I'm just caught up in the mirroring.
That's all good. It's important to bring back.
Yeah.
It's not other things along the lines of mirroring, like anchoring and such sort of methods, is it? It's more techniques.
Yeah, so anchoring
and exercises and activities that people can do.
Yeah. So anchoring is something that comes out of NLP. But before we start to look at that kind of stuff, it really doesn't matter the order, it's whatever you feel intuitively, guided to do. But so once you've done some mirroring, and do this on a weekly, fortnightly basis with one person that you can trust, that will love, care and respect you and hold a great space, for up to 20 minutes, 10 to 20 minutes, where it's just all about you. So believe me, when it's all about you, it actually lasts quite a long time.
Yeah.
But on the surface, it seems like, 20 minutes, is that all? It's, if you're truly present for me when I'm, expressing
it's not a conversation.
Yeah.
If anything, you're deflecting like
a
mirror. You're just deflecting all
absolutely.
that back. So it's like you're with your own thoughts. You've got to almost answer your own questions.
Yeah. But I'm being seen and heard, and that's where the shame gets unlocked, because the shame was locked in when the dysfunctional mirrors, the big magical people, didn't receive us, but now all of a sudden I'm being received. It's game changer. It's absolutely mind blowing. It's holy crap. I've been living my life this way this whole time, to only realize that I can be loved, cared and respected with my crud and in my vulnerability. That's powerful for a lot of people out there that have had their walls up their whole life.
This is true.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of women, this is what women want when they talk about quality time.
Yeah, especially with men really holding that space.
A lot of because
men
always want to try and solve the problems.
Absolutely.
And they don't listen.
Or in a lot of cases on the other side of the spectrum, they just make it about them.
Yes.
So they then have the women that really needs to be held, then just go and tend to their needs and fill their space, as opposed to the male holding their space, but then also being available, having that balance between stepping in and filling the space and being available, and also holding the space in a centered way. It's rare to come by, and it's a skill that takes some practice. So as I mentioned, the mirroring, then what we want to move into is emotional expression and wallowing. So, for example, I'll share some examples so that some people...
Yeah, it's good if you can share some like real life examples and scenarios, then I think for the listeners and people, they'll be able to sort of grasp onto, or as you say, grab onto them a little bit more.
Yeah. I'm going to share something that's going to be very helpful, and it doesn't matter who you are or the journey, your unique journey in your story that you've been on. What I'm about to share, you're actually going to be able to articulate for a huge part what your journey back to core looks like. So I'm going to share something really cool that I've created, and it's derived from what I call the quadrant of conditioning, which I covered with you the other day, which is super cool.
Yes.
So basically, we're a little child, and I look at it in terms of the moment. So whatever happened, the moment, when we were growing up, something happened. So we either stepped in to the moment and we surrendered, we tried to peacekeep, we tried to fix, we were more connected with our sadness. Or on the other hand, we stepped in, but we tried to control, and we were more grasping and grabbing, more of a masculine energy, and we were more connected with our anger. We were trying to turn this painful, chaotic experience into something powerful. That's the way that we coped. So you know how you've got the fight and flight response? So when we step in, we fought, but we fought with anger, or we stepped in and fought with sadness. Okay, so we're trying to fix the moment, and we think it's like we're more surrendered. Okay, so reflect on that, figure out what it is for you. But here's the other two dynamics, the other two. So there's 4 in total. The other 2 is we stepped out and we closed off and we shut down, but we were still holding tight. We were more connected to our anger. So the way, based on my research, the 2 base embodiments of human beings is, in any given moment, we're either grabbing hold,
fight or flight,
or we're letting go.
Yeah, we're attacking or we're retreating.
Yeah, so we've got the fight, flight, and we've got the freeze. Okay, so this is kind of looking at fear-based.
Shock.
Yeah, we're looking at fear-based responses. But beyond that, based on the hundreds of people that I've psychoanalyzed and asked questions, they either, the 2 embodiments is I either grabbed hold a little more or I let go a little more. So we either stepped into the moment with anger or sadness, or we stepped out of the moment with anger or sadness. In other words, more grabbing hold, staying in control. And these people that stepped out and grabbed hold tend to be more passive aggressive. So they're covertly angry,
okay,
as opposed to overtly angry. And then these people over here, they stepped out, but they were more surrendered. So they just shut up, they kept the peace, they became invisible, they became the good boy, the silent one, often the old soul. And so you've basically got another way of looking at this. You're either introvertedly more angry, or introvertedly more sad, or you're more extrovertedly angry, or extrovertedly sad, connected with your sadness.
Okay,
So
that makes sense.
it's more about, even if you don't use the anger or the sadness, it's I'm either more introvertedly grabbing hold, or introvertedly surrendered and letting go, often the doormats, the slaves, or I'm more extrovertedly stepping into the moment, surrendered, peacekeeper, entertainer, clown, jester, hero, good boy, whatever it might be. Or I stepped in, more grabbing hold, the dictator, the bully, the macho, the hero, the brave one. Yeah?
That makes sense.
So to share a couple of archetypes. So just have a think for a moment. I don't know if they want to pause this and just reflect on.
Yeah.
Did I step in, grab hold, or be more surrendered? So more connected with anger or sadness? Or did I step out, grabbing hold, more connected with my anger and uptightness? Or stepped out, more connected with my surrender, my letting go?
And just to reconfirm, that is to reflect on a scenario that happened when you were younger.
So it's more so looking at the general theme. So what you had
yes,
to do
what you usually
overall.
do. Right.
So what became your conditioning? So often it may have been catalyzed by one traumatic scenario where either you stepped in or stepped out, either grabbing hold or being more surrendered. And so basically, when you define which quadrant you're in, either, basically more introvertedly sad or introvertedly angry, or more extrovertedly angry or more extrovertedly sad, connected with sadness, that then paints the journey home for you. So if you stepped back and closed off, more connected with your anger, now what it's about for you is learning to step forward, opening up, being more connected with vulnerability and sadness. Okay? Shall I go through all four?
Please do.
Yeah. So just reflect on that if that fits for you. This commonly, and it's no coincidence, but with the work that I do with business owners, a lot of business owners either hang out in the stepped in, more connected to grabbing hold and more connected with their anger, or they stepped out.
Right.
So they're more at just like having people and the world move for them while they sit back and stay safe, but more connected with their anger. They can call the shots even though they're not stepping into the space.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Aggressive.
So you've as a metaphor, you've got the puppeteer in front of the curtain on the stage, the extroverted angry one. Then you've got the puppeteer that pulls the strings behind the curtain,
Yes.
the more introvertedly angry. Then you've got the puppet on the stage, more extrovertedly sad. And then you've got the puppet that's more backstage, introvertedly connected with sadness. So I trust that metaphor will land well for the audience, and I trust, that makes...
It does.
Yeah. There's many metaphors and stuff to use with this.
That's it, and different examples, metaphors,
Yeah.
descriptions are going to connect with different people.
Yeah.
And again, as I'll
Yeah.
probably reaffirm
Yeah.
to the listeners and viewers, if you're on YouTube, to probably go over this section again.
Totally.
And let it sort of sit, digest, marinate, unpack, dissolve.
Yeah. Because when you realize your conditioning and what you've been doing the whole time, you think it's just what you've always done, that this is who I am, and you realize that actually, no, it's not.
Conditioning.
You've been living from your crust to conceal and hide your crud. And now it's time to embark on the hero's journey back to your core and live from an authentic, loving and trusting space.
Yeah.
So I believe I shared the aspect of the quadrant that was more closed, more introvertedly connected to anger, and the journey home, just to recap on that, is learning to open up, be more vulnerable and surrendered. Now let's go to the upper quadrant here, more overtly angry, more of the space filler as opposed to the space holder. So the overtly or extroverted, angry, grabbing hold person, often the bully, the go-getter, the macho, the dictator, whatever you want to call it, the to put it bluntly, the asshole.
The bad guy.
The bad guy, the villain, that doesn't mind showing their face. Their journey, your journey. Sorry, I take it back saying asshole.
Right.
But like it's just as I say that lightheartedly.
This is raw knowledge.
I say that irreverently.
We keep it real.
Keep
explicit.
it real.
It is. Well,
Yeah,
at the end
absolutely.
of the day, it's language. It's description gets the point across.
Absolutely.
Right. So
Yeah.
if it's in context, go for it.
Cool.
I click the explicit button.
Yeah. I wasn't sure what the parameters were for this, but
Right.
yeah.
It's not PG here.
Let's
You know
bring
what
the
I mean?
freaking real.
Wait, we are.
Sweet.
There's no filters.
Perfect. So
Put your pants on. I'm joking. that's a different joke. Anyway,
Yeah.
continue. So you've got the villain.
Yep. So you've got the person that's more extroverted, more stepping into the moment, more of the space filler, the one that steps into the moment and that had to step into the moment when they were little to perform, that the high achiever in that respect. It's actually about holding space, so taking a back seat a little bit more and being vulnerable and listening more instead of being the storyteller or the one that is always in control. So it's a way to look at this is you're either holding the frame. So in other words, you're in charge of the moment, you're in control of the moment, grabbing hold, or you've given up the frame. So now for these guys, it's actually to learn to give up the frame and allow, in other words, to give up the frame, you have to learn to trust others and to realize that other people can handle it and that they're safe and that you can take a back seat and that you can not be so overt and extroverted and you can kind of sit back and listen and be more vulnerable and not pretend that you've got your shit together all the time. Yeah?
Yeah.
So I trust that'll be landing deep for a lot of business owners and top performers out there, is learn to, instead of filling the space to stay in control, learning to just hold the space and put your trust in others and put other people, you know, in other words, seeing other people not below you but truly equal to you, instead of you jumping into the space, grabbing, taking charge and perceiving everyone else as a little bit less than you. So there's the more than and less than human frame or what I call meta frame that comes in there as well. And often those that are more connected to their anger, whether introverted or extroverted, stepped in or stepped out of the moment, tend to perceive people less than human down here in the pits instead of being equal. Because to perceive a person as equal, truly equal, that means they have to realize that there's relatability, that there's safety, that there is safety in that. But if I keep having people appear less than me or perceive people less than me and I'm some superior, altruistic, you know, self-righteous person, that's how I get to remain safe. Okay? I trust this is hitting home for a lot of you out there.
Yeah, I'm letting it
sit
with me for a second here and just going through a couple of my own examples in my head.
Absolutely. So then if we go to the other side of the quadrant, we've got those that stepped in and stepped out of the moment that were more connected with their sadness.
They were holding the space.
They weren't
one of them was stepping in, one of them stepping back. This is more from a passive, not a grabbing.
Not a grabbing hold, more of a surrendered and letting go type of embodiment.
Right.
So we can only either grab hold or let go, basically.
Yeah,
or stand still and do
I was going to say, but that's very rare then. I just want to actually ask that question before. You said most people grab hold or let go, but very rare for someone to be in the middle of that?
Yeah, so when someone is kind of in the middle, what I've noticed is that because they haven't been swung into one, like deep into this quadrant of conditioning, this particular aspect of conditioning, they tend to be a little more functional because they didn't just go to grabbing hold or they weren't just surrendered and letting go. They actually have more ability and functionality to either go into, they have more emotional range and more behavioural range. So
a bit more like dynamic.
Yeah, so I love that you brought that up because it's not about saying that we just belong in one of these categories. By learning to come back to core, we actually develop the functionality and the resilience and the resourcefulness and the behavioural flexibility to navigate based on what's appropriate, what's good for me in the moment, what's good for others in the moment, and what's good for the greater good, what truly serves. And so that's actually a huge part of the journey. So by going from this upper corner of the quadrant to the opposite, so if you're grabbing hold and you're more extroverted, to come down here and become not more closed, but taking more of a back seat, not being so extroverted and in control and becoming more vulnerable. By going in that direction, you arrive in the center. You arrive at core on your way there as you embody that. It's not about then swinging down into there, because often what can happen is, this is what I call the pendulum of polarity. Often a lot of people that, say for example, are closed off and angry, all of a sudden open up and become fully vulnerable, but to the wrong person. And so they get scared and shocked, and then they go straight back into the aspect of conditioning that they did all along. And then they go, see, no wonder I can't trust the world. No wonder. So they often, what can happen as part of the journey, we will dabble in the different aspects of the quadrant
It's
a
not,
little to
you're
extreme.
not, you're not married to one.
No,
It's not exclusive.
it's not exclusive, but we
Okay.
normally have a factory setting, a default, a conditioned way that we go back to. Okay?
And that's the one that we're trying to identify, which gives us an intuition or a roadmap to the journey back to, back home, back
Yes.
to the core. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. So, coming into
Mhm.
the because it's important that we acknowledge the other half of the people, and this is predominantly where my conditioning came from, and I'll share a little bit about that as well, if that's cool.
Of course.
So you've got the other side of the quadrant where you've got those people that either stepped into the moment, more connected to their sadness, they're letting go and being surrendered, trying to peacekeep, more valuing peace instead of conflict, and letting go and trying to take care of everyone. Or they stepped back, closed off, shut down, because it just wasn't safe at all, and they weren't safe. Okay? So the journey home for the person that stepped back, kind of had everything at a distance, but was still surrendered and weak and open, their journey is actually learning to come out. So instead of being backstage, learn to become on the stage, but more connected with grabbing hold of the moment,
Right.
and more connected with their anger. And so by heading up there now, you will arrive at core self.
Mhm.
So it's just a way to kind of use the quadrants to get and understand, like if you are more closed off, it's about becoming more open and extroverted in your nature. A lot of people will say, like, oh, I'm an introvert, or I'm an extrovert.
Yeah, it's sort of it's a terminology people throw out very loosely.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what we're starting to unpack. Well, is my introversion who I truly am, or is it just how I was conditioned and programmed and what I chose as a child to get by and survive when I was growing up? A very important question to ask ourselves, because a lot of people have their excuses. Oh, I'm introverted, I can't connect with people, networking's not for me, I'll just sit in the background. What if it was for you? What if those aspects of you that were curious about other people, that was open and vulnerable and spontaneous and enjoyed joy and adventure, was actually inside you right now, and you had those resources, and it's just that
You're suppressing them almost.
it's just that they were discouraged and they were misplaced, and you kind of hid them because they weren't really working for you when you were growing up. And what if it's now about restoring them? And it is. Restoring them. This is where we get our fullness, wholeness, and unification within ourselves. This is where that comes from that space.
Yeah, I think it's
So
a key word, unification,
Yeah.
alignment.
Yeah.
Being congruent with what you think and what you say and what you do, who you are. You become one.
Absolutely.
You're not pulling in directions.
Absolutely.
I say this, but I do that. I look like this, but I believe in that. It's very.
Yes. A lot of people are unfortunately living a life of quiet desperation because we're still too busy living out of our crust, living other people's values that were imposed on us, instead of going on the courageous and vulnerable journey, the hero's journey, and discovering who we are at core. And first of all, tying it back into the conversation, is understanding our default conditioning that we kind of
So identifying
grew
that
up.
quadrant.
Yep, identifying where we are in the quadrant, then identifying the direction that we need to head in. And so for those that were closed off and more connected with sadness, as I shared, it's about opening up and being more connected with anger, standing your ground, being firm, setting your boundaries, saying what needs to be said in the moment when it matters most, not off behind the scenes to someone else that won't solve the problem.
Yeah, because it's irrelevant.
Absolutely. And for the people that were opened up, extroverted, kind of cracked open, were pulled into the moment to try and rescue and save it and fix it, make sure everyone was okay. And your journey is actually more about stepping back, realizing that you don't have to fill the space all the time, that people can take care of their own shit. And you can kind of step back and become more of a space holder instead of a space filler. And you can connect with your firmness and you're grabbing hold in your anger, and that you deserve that, and that you're safe to go back in. Here's a cool metaphor I'd love to share. You're safe to go back inside your own home, and if people want to come over to your home, they can come in because your home's safe.
So it's like letting people meet you in your reality,
yes.
not meeting them in theirs.
Instead of it's the metaphor that I explain in this quadrant, I'm going to share it because it's kind of funny.
Yeah, no,
and it's kind of like stereotypical in a way. You'll start to think of the neighbours that are always over at your house, the neighbours that are nosy, the neighbours that are always over because they're too afraid of being in their own home. And so, you should think about your neighbours, So the people that I'll start with where we're at right now, the people that are too open, more connected with their sadness, more extroverted, they're locked outside of their own home. Right? So they're locked outside of their own home, trying to protect everyone else's homes. So meanwhile, their home gets neglected.
This is a good analogy.
Yes.
I think everyone can resonate with this.
Absolutely. And then let's go to the bottom corresponding aspect of that quadrant. People, they're locked inside their own home, and they're too afraid to get out of their own home because they themselves aren't safe. And so they stay inside their own home to protect everyone else and their homes outside. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Then if we go the other side of the quadrant, the people that grabbed hold, whether introverted or extroverted, grabbing hold, more connected with their anger, the person that stepped back, closed off, grabbed hold, became more introverted, they're inside their own home because they're protecting themselves and their home from the inside out, looking out of the curtain. Right? And no one else is safe, the neighbours aren't safe, so they just stay in their home all the time. Or...
just that fear.
Yeah. Or you've got the extroverted one that's grabbing hold and connected with their anger. They're protecting their home from the outside. It's kind of the guy that...
they're out on the lawn.
They're out on the lawn raging and shouting. With the shotgun.
Thinking of like Ned Flanders when he goes mad.
Yeah. Get off my damn property. like that whole kind of...
Yeah.
So it's kind of a way to kind of personify and give a metaphor to each of the people. So another way of looking at it is you've got low trust in others. You've got low trust in others for those that kind of grabbed hold, and the people that kind of let go and surrendered tend to experience more low trust in self. So they find their certainty through connecting with others in the world, even if they are closed off. They'll still be there to please and take care of. They're more of the shut down, quiet slave. And that's due to a low trust in self. So there's some kind of core beliefs that we can also tie in within the quadrant. Is if you're someone who's more grabbing hold, connected with your anger, it's because in a lot of ways you didn't trust the moment. So you tried to control it. Or you didn't trust the other person. So you stepped back and distanced yourself and just made sure you're in control of you and your own little immediate environment. Or on the other hand, we were cracked open, more surrendered and letting go because we couldn't connect with our strength in that moment. So we have more of a low trust in self and trust others more than ourselves. So it's a lot that we're sharing.
I was going to say there's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to digest and to internalize. I know it's going to be pretty full on for a lot of people, and it's full on for me. And again, I think that's why people may have to listen to it a couple of times, let it sit, do some of their own soul searching, if you like.
Yeah.
So is this generally though, to bring it and to put some context to when you work with a client, is this somewhere that you will always start? Will you always use this as a roadmap to kind of, to use an analogy that I share with clients, to throw a dart at a board and see where we are on the dartboard so we can work our way towards, in this case, the core or the bullseye, in my opinion.
I love that.
In my analogy, we don't have to get to the bullseye, but we want to get closer to it. But first of all, we need to get on the dartboard and then see where we're at.
Yeah. So to answer that, basically, a lot of business owners will say, hey, I want to scale my business. I want people to perform better.
Yes.
I want to get more business. I want to expand interstate, whatever it might be. And the first thing that I have to realize, and I share this metaphor, is that your business was your creation. So it's an extension of you.
Very much so.
The business is completely dependent on you. However, let's be functional and resourceful and healthy here. You are not dependent on your business. So it's important that there's still that healthy sense of separation.
Yeah,
but
there needs to be a segregation.
But do not let yourself off the hook and think that your business isn't reliant on you in some way. I mean, obviously it depends how you set up your business, if it's fully automated, but for the most part,
you need to take ownership.
If you know, especially in the early stages of business, like if you're in, you know, the infancy stage or the adolescent stage of business, you play a massive role in it, just the same, and here's a metaphor, as you do if you were to raise a child. It's completely dependent on you, and how you show up and how functional you are will determine how functional the business is. So this is where it starts to get a bit more geeky, a bit more quantum, a bit more metaphysical. Most business owners, I see a correlation between issues that business owners have within themselves tends to be magnified or manifested in their business. So I'll give you an example. The person that is closed off and low trust in others tends to create situations where they're burned by a lot of their employees or their staff members or their business partners. And that's just one cliche, very just kind of opened example. But so to answer the question, we come back to self. We focus on the conditioning of self. It's a lot of self stuff, stuff to do with their own conditioning.
It's looking within yourself, or the primary purpose of this work. Yeah.
So here's the quote: "Look near before we look far." So before we point the finger at the staff member that's a pain in the ass and that isn't pulling their weight, we actually need to, there's actually a hierarchy to follow, and I share this with my clients. It's called the critical alignment model, and it's profound in business. So basically, if we look at a business itself, it has a feminine component. So what I mean by that is all the qualitative structures. So what the company's values are, what the vision is, what the mission is, how we roll. You know, what are the written ground rules of the business?
What's the creed?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then we've got our masculine component or major aspect of the business. So when we look at anything in creation, we've got the feminine and masculine component. So first I start with the overall, which is the vision, where the inspiration came from in the first place, the mission, the values. So we look at the qualitative feminine aspect of the business. Then we dive into looking at the masculine structural aspect of the business. Then once those two are in place, the business is brought to life. So therefore we go into implementation phase. So that's the third level. And then the last phase is feedback phase. So a lot of business owners, come back to the example, that the person that isn't performing well, that's actually in the feedback phase. So instead of trying to address the person, how about we look near before we look far? Let's follow the hierarchy. Let's, first of all, maybe it's not about going straight to the qualitative structures, or maybe it is. Maybe we can go, when I hired this person, so looking at recruitment, when I hired this person, was I ensuring that I was being very aware of the values that we want the person to bring? Or did we just hire the person out of desperation because we needed someone?
Yeah, did that person align?
Did that person align with our company?
With values?
Was he a match for our qualitative benchmarks? No. And then, but often even before we look at recruitment, we look at leadership. So, well, hang on. If this person isn't performing the way they should be, is the person, this is the category, this is the kind of meta frame that we use here, is it that they can't yet because they don't have the training?
Which is
most
usually
of the time,
the case.
Usually the
People
case.
are set up to fail.
Or is it that they won't? And once we decide whether they can't yet, because they don't have the training, therefore it's not about the person yet. We don't have the right to point the finger at the person, our staff member. It's actually about going, let's follow up the ladder, because shit flows downhill. Let's follow. Has that paused, or is it still going?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
It usually does. It just comes up with notifications.
Oh,
that's all.
beautiful.
But we're still good.
Still rolling?
Yeah, we're still rolling.
Yeah, so basically it ends up...
Thank you for pointing that out.
No worries. So we must look at leadership first, then look at but even before leadership, look at the training. But then even before the training, look at how the business owner is showing up.
Right.
So there's such a hierarchy, and the lower the more zoomed in and engrossed and fixated we become on the person, which is in the bottom level, the results, the feedback loop, the more at effect we become. The more imprisoned we become, the more reactive we become. But if we follow it up the hierarchy, and first of all, we look near before we look far, we work with what we have right in front of us. How am I showing up in my business? And this is often where the change, some of the most miraculous shifts that you'll experience in business is by addressing our conditioning, and indirectly, as you start to show up differently in subtle ways, make different decisions, start to be a different example. You're no longer, for example, operating from a primal, primitive, dysfunctional leadership space of authority and I'm the boss, so do this. But now you're showing up from a place of inspiration. So therefore, leadership is now elevated. And it's no longer about power tripping or just do it because I said so, right?
Yeah, leading out of fear.
Then all of a sudden, people in the business start to behave differently because they've now got a different example to follow. They've now got a leader that's more healthy, functional, and resourceful, and more centered, more authentic. So no longer living out of their, for example, the dictator, domineering, overbearing crust, because they've learned to reconnect with their sadness. They've learned to reconnect with being vulnerable. They've stopped being a control freak, and they're actually, instead of having people in the company that are stuck in being dependent and reliant on management or the business owner, they're now starting to have the room to become their own person, to develop autonomy, to take initiative, to take more responsibility. So it's so intertwined and connected, and it's something that I'm super passionate about.
Yeah, ditto on that one. Leadership is something that fascinates me, and something where I feel a lot of businesses really go wrong. And I always use the expression, I embody the term, lead by example. And I think it is, not for the most part, always good. Again, look near before we look far, because it isn't always near, but 9 times out of 10, it is.
It is near, yeah.
Put the ownership back on yourself. What are you doing that could perhaps be affecting and rippling through the business?
Yeah.
And you know, I think that the Japanese do that really well. You know, there's things like Kaizen out there.
Kaizen.
Constant ever-changing improvement,
Yes.
Henry Ford, all that sort of stuff. But it's absolutely fascinating. Some great examples there, a lot of value, Brad.
You're welcome,
It's
man.
been a great conversation so far. I'd love to continue, but I know we're coming to time.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking we are definitely, like with a lot of my guests, there's going to be round 2, perhaps round 3, and we'll talk a little bit more about this off camera, but we've touched base on it in terms of perhaps structuring something as well for the listeners, for people who want to really go on this journey. Perhaps they want to go on this self-development and connect with you, and perhaps they can get a bit more guidance and help. But before we go over that, before we go over the last question, I have a couple of rapid fire ones which I like to ask. They're a bit more fun, they're a bit more lighthearted. It just shows a bit of humanity. Not that you've not showed anything, because you've shown very much. Well, the first thing, I'm going to pick a different one because I see a beautiful bookshelf behind you. So for those who are watching on YouTube, they can see. And if you're not and you're listening, there's quite a little library here. There's a few names that have already jumped out at me. That's why we're in our conversation. I wasn't being rude. I was looking past and I was sort of reading some of the ones that were on my list or I have read and been checked off. What would be, and not to steal this off Tim Ferriss, but I think it's a great question, what would be, out of all the books you've read, the one book that you would gift to people the most? And I know that's hard because it's not about one book, and I don't want that to be the thing. So people watching, it's not about one book, but if you could gift one book that could help people, and again, I know different people would have different books, but what would be the most gifted book on that shelf that you would probably reach out and grab?
I actually don't think I have the book that I gift on this shelf, but it's, or is it up there? No, it must be on
Wait.
one of my other bookshelves. So, it'd be As a Man Thinketh
Ooh.
by James Allen.
Ooh.
It's a classic.
It's a good one.
Very succinct, very potent, very direct in terms of just having us understand that we create our own damn reality.
Oh yeah.
And we are responsible for the results. We are responsible for the fruits we bear in our lives. So that'll be it, man.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. And so put that on your list.
Put that on your list.
Put that on your list. Make sure it gets read. I've heard nothing but good things. It's on my list. I'm working through it. It's a big list.
You can get the audio tape as well on YouTube. It goes for about an hour.
I was going to say the audiobook's good these
The
days.
audio tape on YouTube, just As a Man Thinketh by James Allen.
It's like what we're doing now, isn't it? What are we? An hour 22. This is long form content team. This is what we do. No, but this is good. And this is what the podcast is about. It's to extrapolate things more. We don't get the opportunity on Instagram. We don't get the opportunity on Facebook to a degree. This is why we created the podcast, to be able to talk to a degree without too many time constraints.
Yeah.
My next question is, and I'm going to ask you more thought-provoking questions because of your background and your mindset, because I think I'm going to get some interesting answers.
Yeah.
So the first one is, if you could wake up anywhere in the world tomorrow, where would it be and why?
It's a really good question. You've got me.
Whatever first comes to mind. Knee-jerk reaction.
Well, it was Hawaii.
Right, there you go.
Yeah, Hawaii. And the reason being is because, and I've heard, that it's a very spiritual place. And that there's also, I'm quite into like the geeky sci-fi UFO phenomena and all that stuff as well. That's a side of me that a lot of you might not resonate with. But I certainly love it.
I'm sensing another topic.
Yeah, absolutely.
But again, I'll have to save that for another time.
Yeah. Dr. Stephen Greer, check it out. Sorry.
No, go for it, man. Now there's some good ones I've had look into. I'm very inquisitive about that myself.
But
I think we all are, right?
Yeah.
It's got to be.
Yeah, and hence the socks that I'm wearing, space and rocket ships.
Mate, astronomy.
The quirky socks.
My marketing man, George, will love you for that.
Yeah.
He's got the NASA bag and everything.
Yeah.
Top man, he loves that.
Yeah, but it's a beautiful place. Absolutely gorgeous, beautiful beaches, beautiful mountains, and just a more spiritual, mystical, magical component that comes with it as well.
Good, it's very diverse.
Yeah, that really speaks to my curiosity, my hunger and curiosity for learning in the world, in the universe we live in. Yeah.
Do you think there is more after we die? In your opinion, are we dead and we're gone? Is there something after?
So, as Albert Einstein says, nothing can either be created nor destroyed, only transformed. So I believe that this energy, consciousness within us, soul, consciousness, energy, whatever you want to call it, I believe that we, in fact, drop off this flesh-like vehicle, this vessel, like a raincoat. And I'm not sure if you've looked into astral traveling or lucid dream or anything like that, but I have actually experienced, I haven't experienced astral traveling fully just yet, but I have experienced my consciousness, and this is obviously a topic for another time, and this is definitely a rabbit hole that people won't want to dive down, or a lot of people will be fascinated about. Experience like my consciousness peeling out of my body, and so I definitely...
The outer body experience.
Yeah, the outer body experiences. A lot of people talk about near-death experiences as well.
Like DMT.
Yeah.
Again, not to Joe Rogan it, but I mean, that's...
Oh, absolutely.
You know, but because apparently that's what's released when we die, so...
Yeah, absolutely.
Which from people I've spoken to who have used it appropriately can give you that... You're never the same after you do that. It gives you a very... talk about going inside yourself and then going outside yourself.
Yeah.
Apparently that's the...
Oh yeah.
A key.
Yeah.
That's meditation.
On that as well, there's a gentleman, he's a Taoist monk, Mantak Chia. He runs what's called a dark room retreat. And in this dark room retreat, it's completely pitch black, so you can't even see your hands. And you, after a certain amount of days, is it serotonin or melatonin? I can't remember. There's a build-up of, I think, melatonin.
Correct.
Because there's no sunlight to convert it into serotonin or release serotonin. And eventually you start releasing a chemical called tryptophan, and then eventually you start releasing DMT. And because you can't see anything in front of you, your waking state, your awake state and your dream state become so blurred and undefined, and you basically experience a trip, like transcending the physical body and the five senses for days on end, and it's sustainable.
Yeah, there's been a study where two scientists, it was many years ago, went down to a cave where there was no light, and they were down there for weeks, and they did experiments. I can't remember the exact findings, but it's within the niche. It's very interesting. I'll find it.
That's really cool.
Good. They were looking at like sleep cycles and circadian rhythm and melatonin and all that sort of stuff, which is again very interesting.
That's cool.
So to my final question, which I ask all my guests, can you identify a time, a scenario, more specifically a fear in your life that you had to face, how you overcame it, and what you learned, what you took from that experience?
So
it can be small, it can be big, it can be whatever the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah. So for me, about 2 years ago, are we still good for battery and all that jazz?
Oh yeah, mate.
Yeah, cool. For me, about 2 years ago, I decided to run my first workshop, which had 13 people in the room. But here's the painful part. A couple of years before that, I realized that I wanted to be a facilitator. I realized that I wanted to teach, that I had a passion for helping people on their journey, whether it's in business or just personal life in general. And so I hid and procrastinated and avoided for about 3 years, up until about 2 years ago, and then decided that I need to shake things up. That I felt like I was backed into a corner, and the pain becomes so great. There's that saying, when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of changing, you'll change your life and you'll transform, you'll take action.
Correct. And sometimes you need to go a little bit more rock bottom before you rebound.
Yeah. And so for myself, it was deciding to hold a workshop, and I did it on beliefs. Change your beliefs, change your life. And so it was a hour and a half facilitated workshop, and I had 13 people in the room. And initially I was absolutely shitting myself, because in terms of my conditioning, I was the one that didn't really grab hold. I was the one that was more surrendered. I kind of moved between the introverted and the extroverted role, tend to be more extroverted. So I could, to tie this into context of what we've been talking about, I could very much jump in the spotlight, but not on my own terms, for other people's terms, and for what was meaningful and mattered to them.
Right.
But for me to do it on my own terms, that would be me grabbing hold, and I was very afraid of that. So for me to truly own with conviction, and that's what I had to embody, this is how I overcome it, is to just claim that this is my mission, and this is my passion, and this is my purpose, to come out with strength, not to step out with weakness and be there to take care of everyone else, but to truly, in public, share what I'm deeply passionate about, wear my heart on my sleeve, and own it, regardless of how it's received or how people respond. Very, very scary for me. Yeah. So how I overcame it? Well, first of all, I just had to make the decision. So there's this idea that in order to change our reality or to transform ourselves, often we think, then we feel a certain way, then we act. We have to do the opposite to create transformation in a lot of respects. This is just one theory. We act, and then we'll feel a different way, and then we'll start to think differently. So if I've got all these beliefs and all this baggage that's holding me back, I can't just sit there on the couch trying to think my way through my baggage and then hope that I'll feel differently, and then all of a sudden I'll have the confidence to take action and do the thing. But here's the thing, and I trust this will serve many of you. The quote is, aim for competence before confidence. So how can you be good at the thing before you've tried it? It's absolutely nonsensical and magical thinking, which
you learn by doing.
And you learn by doing.
You
so
have to have a go.
Yeah. So if
at
you
some point.
Absolutely. So if you want to change things up, what I did then is I just completely acted differently, went against everything, rebelled against my conditioning, then felt differently. During the experience, I felt so connected with me. It was like I was born again. Felt incredible.
Felt like that was what you were meant to be doing.
Yeah. And then I started to think differently. You know what? I've got this. You know what? I could do this again. And so that is essentially how we can create rapid transformation and move through our biggest fear, is by, I don't know, in a sense, gamifying our challenge, finding a way to just do it, act, and know that it's going to be clunky. So sharing all the fine print with myself and just bringing reality to it helped me do it. I'm going to suck. It's going to be tough. I'm going to be shitting myself. I'm going to be nervous. I'm not going to be the best at it. I'm not going to be the greatest. I'm going to stumble.
Going to make mistakes.
But that's okay.
That's part of the process.
That's a part of the process. Yeah. I can be flawed and fabulous. I don't just have to be fabulous all the damn time. I can be flawed too and still rock forth and own it. Own what I love in a clunky way. But as long as I am owning me and staying true to me, that's all that matters.
Thank you for sharing.
Boom.
I like the mic drop.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you're right, I think, or to put into words what I heard the other day, or to reiterate, I should say, is consistency beats perfection every time.
Yeah.
Because perfection is subjective.
Yeah.
And the only way to get better at something is by doing it.
Yeah.
If you want to get better at squats, squat more.
Yeah.
You know? Find the tools, understand the skill acquisition, go back and unpack it before you can move forward. So no, that's thank you for sharing, Brad. I appreciate that. It's a good example. I think people can take things not only away from what you just said, or some key learnings, but also a lot of other value from this conversation that we've had today. And again, we'll strive to do more, because there's a lot of other questions I have. There's many avenues which we could
I love that.
Steer down.
All the rabbit holes.
All the rabbit holes. Rabbit warrens everywhere. And there are many rabbit holes, and it's interesting, and I think that's the beauty of life, isn't it? We're always searching, there's always more, and if it was all so simple, it would be boring. It'd be like a game.
Oh yeah.
With all the answers. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
You know, we've all got to go on our journeys, which is good. For people who want to find out more about you, they want to connect with you, where can they find you? What's the best?
Yep. So you can go to my website, objectiveconsulting.com.au, flick me an email which is on the website at brad@objectiveconsulting.com.au, or you're more than welcome to follow me on social media, on LinkedIn, on Facebook and Instagram, and it's just Brad Semmens, SEMMENS.
Beautiful. And as always, we'll put those links in the description below, on the YouTube notes, whatever platform you are listening on. Brad, thank you, my friend.
Thank you so much.
An insightful conversation.
It's been awesome to hang out with you, and it's an honour to be on your podcast with you.
Mate, the pleasure is all mine. I look forward to many more conversations. Guys, for everyone listening, thank you. Keep smashing those reviews. They really help out. Make sure you subscribe weekly for more videos. More like this. Again, it's raw knowledge. We're not just addressing training. We're not just addressing nutrition. We're addressing the bigger component, which really correlates to the success in those two sectors, which is lifestyle, which is what some of which we've talked about here today. So until next time, as always, guys, stay fearless.